Well, it didn't take long for both sides of the abortion issue to raise their voices and signs high in anticipation of the decision by the Supreme Court to possibly overturn Roe v. Wade, a woman's right to an abortion. But beyond the demonstrations in the streets are some very real consequences in the upcoming election cycles. A Democrat-controlled Senate held a vote this week to try to pass a bill that would make a woman's right to an abortion the law of the land. As expected, it failed, with all of the Republicans, joined by Democrat Joe Manchin, voting against it. Professor Mark Jones is a fellow in political science at the Baker Institute for Public Policy at Rice University. Joins me now to discuss the political landscape, how this may change because of the anticipated decision. Good morning, Dr. Jones.
Good morning.
So midterms are looking tough for Democrats even before this all happened. Now, many of the Democrats are looking at this as a way to energize their base. Is it the right or smart decision? Because I've seen some information that says that may not be the case.
Well, it's a tricky issue for Democrats in the sense that it is a mobilizational tool for a certain segment of the population. In states like Texas, where only half of voters or even a little less turn out in midterm elections, if you can get reliable voters to turn out who wouldn't otherwise have turned out, that's a good thing. And that can help Democrats. On the other hand, Democrats often tread warily in the issue of abortion because a majority of Texans, even those that support abortion rights, consider abortion to be a tragedy and distasteful, and it's not something that they want to celebrate. And so when Democrats push it as a civil right or some type of right in terms of being of great importance and something to laud and celebrate, that alienates people. I think politically, probably the place where it'll help Democrats the most is in terms of their battle of trying to retain control of the U.S. Senate. Right now, it's 50-50 with Vice President Kamala Harris breaking the tie. And there's several very close races in places like New Hampshire, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Ohio that this could help Democrats maybe keep their majority there, since in the House, it's looking like it's going to be gone for sure.
I saw a report someplace, a report that showed that there was a survey done among some Republicans who were, and Democrats who were saying that that the hot button issue for them was not abortion, but the economy.
Right, when inflation's running at record rates for the past 40 years, and that's a very real issue for virtually everyone, a primarily theoretical issue, which is what abortion is for an overwhelming number of Americans, is going to get second stage outside of the real hardcore activists. But in reality, they're already voting either Democrat or Republican, depending on their position on the issue.
So Democrats often are tagged with the emotion thing, and the Republicans are tagged with let's just get it done. And it looks like over the last 50 years, that's what Republicans have been able to do methodically as it relates to Roe versus Wade, knowing that it was an uphill battle, but they were doing everything that they needed to do to really get to this point where they may get this reversed.
Well, exactly. They've been chipping away at the abortion legislation, at Roe v. Wade, for really the past 50 years, ever since it was passed in 1973. This was probably a little more success than I think even Republicans would have hoped for 2 or 3 years ago, in the sense that if you had asked Republicans 2 or 3 years ago, would they have settled for the Mississippi legislation becoming the new Roe v. Wade, such as Chief Justice Roberts was trying to impose but failed, they would have said yes. But they actually achieved more. That is what is likely going to be the overturning of Roe v. Wade, sending it back to the states, meaning by the end of the year, about half the states will allow abortion and about half the states will not, except if the mother's health is at risk.
I've read about abortion rights. It's not always been the focal point of the right. Evangelicals at one point in time were focused on fights against segregation as opposed to abortion all the way until the late 70s, until the 80s. This whole thing, it has been, quote, a hot button issue that helped to galvanize a base that otherwise might not have been galvanized.
Right. It really helped the Republican Party become the party of evangelical Protestants, which wasn't the case 30 or 40 years ago, when if you knew that someone was a Anglo or white evangelical Protestant, it was tough to predict how they were going to vote in a general election. Now you can overwhelmingly predict that they're going to vote Republican, and abortion is one of the issues that's allowed that issue to solidify. We see it even in the Texas legislature, where today we don't have a single Texas Republican who is pro-choice. Sarah Davis, who was the last and only pro-choice Republican, lost her election in 2020.
It seems really interesting throughout the process of what's going on in this state, in this country. Right now, I keep getting reports. We get the inflation is high. jobs reports are good, good, good. So how you balance all of that? I guess just the pocketbook issue, is that what the bottom line is, no matter what? Pocketbook is the issue?
Well, economic issues always drive a majority of voting behavior, especially in general elections. In the primaries, particularly in the Republican primary, issues of abortion are more important, and in the Democratic side as well. And because when people don't differ on sort of economic issues, Republicans also want to make sure that they don't differ on abortion. So that's an issue that can mobilize people in the primary, but it's less in the general election.
Very interesting. Always interesting topic. And obviously, both Republicans and Democrats want to use this in some way, shape, and form to make headway in the midterms, which is really important.
Right. And that's why I think Democrats are going to be using it for mobilizational purposes. They're just going to have to thread the needle of getting their base out without alienating moderates.
Dr. Mark Jones, thank you. Look forward to speaking to you again as we get closer to the midterms. Is that a deal?
Yeah, it's great.
Good deal. We'll do that. Just ahead.